Hello, Branches. Welcome to another Talking Branches segment. I'm your guest host, Mike. Timmy is continuing to be out, but I'm at least joined in the studio with Daniel again, and really looking forward to talking about this week's message, which had a really fun title, I thought, because Gracie meets Truthy feels like it should be a movie, and so that's...
It actually would probably make a great movie.
Yeah, and so that feels like we'd be going on an adventure, some sort of like summer trip, and then you'd wind up seeing what happens when Gracie meets Truthy, and it would be a disaster, probably.
Great.
So
It'd be
maybe,
awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit about what you talked about on Sunday had a lot to do with not balance so much, right?
Right.
But instead having this notion of we need to be all grace and all truth.
Right.
Can you kind of unpack a little bit about why balance doesn't work?
Yeah, actually, and I think that's a really important question because we tend to, I mentioned this in the message, we tend to move in an effort to solve a tension, the tension between, the movie you just described, between Gracie and Truthy. To resolve that tension, we move towards one extreme or another, and to get rid of one, we miss something. To solve that tension, we have to almost throw one out, and if you throw one out, it's an incomplete picture. I think grace without truth is neglect. If you are engaging with people with all grace and no truth, you're neglecting the truth, and neglect isn't love. You can't love someone you're neglecting. You can't love someone that you're not, sharing the truth with. But truth without grace quickly turns into abuse. Because all you're doing is pointing out how horrible they are, or and there's good truth too. So to assume that truth is all bad or all negative, I guess, isn't the full picture either. But to approach someone with no grace, it quickly turns into abuse. And so to throw one out or to try and be in balance, oftentimes we, as humans, we get out of balance all the time. And so when you're out of balance and you're trying to balance the two, you can quickly move into neglect or quickly move into abuse or hurt, and that's not helpful. It's also not what Jesus modeled. He was always engaging with people, telling the truth and offering grace. And we've called to be, God's image in the world. And so a part of us being His image is to interact and engage with situations, circumstances, and people in a way that He engaged with those as well. And so the fullness of truth and the fullness of grace, while it's difficult, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it sounds like balance in a way is moving towards compromise, which would be to give, you have to give something up in order to achieve the other side of it, which the world likes to say that's the way it should be.
When both truth and grace are in balance, you can't have the fullness of both.
Right.
And even in the illustration of taking each cup, one representing truth and one representing grace, and pouring both of them into a bigger container, that's exactly what I think a lot of us... Yeah, it requires more capacity.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us need to ask God to increase our capacity to love more like Him, and that looks like more grace and more truth, not a balance of what already exists. So we need to fill our cups, fill our lives, fill our words, fill our actions with more truth and with more grace.
So when we're talking about asking God to increase our capacity to love like Him, it almost sounds like some of this love is going to hurt. Is that an accurate statement? Like, if we're going to be being truthful to those around us, we may not have the luxury or the advantage of avoiding conflict all the time. Is that fair to say?
I don't know that I'd use the word hurt, only because that can communicate a malicious intent. That word can.
Sure.
And love is not malicious. But love can be offensive. I like that word. Love can be offensive sometimes. The truth can be offensive because the truth oftentimes, like I said, truth can be a positive thing. But when truth is pointing out something that's misaligned in our life, we can take it offensively, even from someone who truly loves us and wants the best for us. But it can be uncomfortable. It can be offensive, and it can hurt sometimes. truth without grace almost always hurts, because there's no, it's you've done this and now the relationship is now broken with no opportunity to be mended. That's truth without grace. So yeah, sometimes it can be painful. Sometimes it's often tense. There's often conflict surrounding that. And I think one of the perspectives we have right now in our culture, and right now, not just in this season, but just in this, I don't know, my generation, I think, and even in our kids' generation, conflict is automatically seen as a negative, bad thing.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that. Conflict, I need some conflict in my life because there's things I'm doing wrong that are conflicting with God's best. And I need someone to create some conflict around those issues so that I can see the truth. But I need to know that I'm not being condemned or judged by my friend who's pointing this out. That I'm actually accepted and they're willing to walk with me through it. I think that's a big deal. So yes, truth is uncomfortable and sometimes painful. But it's that shouldn't keep us, right? Jesus didn't. He didn't ignore truth to keep people comfortable, and we shouldn't do that either. But our goal shouldn't be discomfort.
We shouldn't seek to offend. It just may be a byproduct of what happens.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, those are different approaches.
Very different. So no, that's really good. As you mentioned, looking around in the world right now, it almost seems, speaking more to that offended side, that we are taught or cajoled or any manner of like influenced to, if somebody's offended, then we have gone too far, or we have done the wrong thing. As you said, conflict is viewed as a negative. What would you say to, let's just pick an example, a middle schooler who is interacting with their friends in this time where they don't have school, it's like they don't get a lot of face time with somebody, but they know their friend's doing something wrong. They don't want to lose influence, per se. How does somebody go about walking into a possibly offensive situation, but maintaining the relationship, the grace in that space?
I think it's so hard to give, and I even mentioned this too, it's so hard to give a formula for how to approach those things. I'm not saying it's a bad question, it's a great question. But I think it's less about, I don't want to give a strategy to anybody for how to do that, but a position or a posture to approach someone from, I think, changes the way we choose our words and the way that we come across. And the posture should be, I want to share this truth with you because I want the best for you. If we can approach people and we can approach people who are making mistakes, who are sinning, who are their brokenness is showing or whatever, if we can approach people from a posture of I'm for you, I'm for you as an individual, and if we can approach them with a posture that removes us from the equation, like our own opinions, our own desires, our own wants, and it really is, we're approaching them from a I love you and I care about you and I don't want to neglect you, but I also want to love you the way that Jesus loved me. That changes how we talk. If we feel the need to correct someone for the sake of correcting them, we're going to have an approach that's probably unnecessarily offensive or unnecessarily hurtful, as opposed to I want to correct you because sin breaks people. Sin hurts people, and I'm seeing that happen to you, and I care about you. I don't want you to be hurt. We may be offensive, but it won't be unnecessarily offensive because our posture is for them.
It's an others focus rather than a self focus.
And
I know you and I have talked a bit about it, but on the show it may have been a little bit since we've talked about parenting in particular. This feels like a struggle that many, I know in my household we struggle with it all the time. A struggle of I want to love my kids, right? And I think you at home also want to love your kids as much as possible. But you also don't want to necessarily reward a bad behavior by being too much in grace, right? And just ignoring it. But you also know that if you come down too hard, you risk breaking the relationship worse than their behavior may have done.
Or
and
pushing them away or losing influence.
And so how does, just obviously not a formula, but like just sort of some advice for parents as they are seeing their kids far more often than they used to, right? They're,
Right.
They're not at school, you can't
And
find
they
babysitters
continue
half
to
the
see
time,
them
right?
more than they're used
yeah,
to.
I'm gearing up for homeschooling, we'll see what happens, but just as they try to navigate and try to come up with a way to be the fullness of both with their children.
Yeah.
Knowing that oftentimes we may come down thinking we're doing the right thing, but it may be abuse in a way as we're so focused on the truth.
Yeah. I think what I think is so important to think about and recognize in all of that, first of all, is that parents, I mean, we make mistakes. We make the wrong call sometimes. And asking for forgiveness from our kids, I think we should not fear that.
Yeah.
We should not be afraid of that. Because there will be times, I promise, where you come down too hard. There will be times where you extend too much grace and too much mercy in seasons where, man, you really should be coming down. And when you look at even Scripture, there's scriptures that, spare the rod, spare the child, which makes it sound like, man, we just need to be, as parents, we're disciplinaries in their life. There's others, one of the ones that convicts me the most is in, I think it's Colossians. Paul says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. I do that way more than I want to. So it is this journey of coming, of asking the Holy Spirit to come alongside us and say, God, help me be the fullness of both in this season, in this circumstance, in this situation. And again, I think it's so important, the same way Jesus didn't apply a formula to each circumstance that he approached. We can't do that with our individual kids. We can't even do that with one kid in a new situation.
Right.
There's times where I sit with one of my kids and I'm like, man, here's the truth. You messed up, and here's the consequence based on your actions. There's other times where I sit with my kids and I go, do you realize what you did? Do you realize you deserve a consequence? And if they're able to say, yes, it was wrong. Yes, I probably shouldn't be able to play in the playroom or play with friends. Or there's times where I choose to say, you do deserve that. I'm not going to administer a consequence this time. But
mercy.
What you did was wrong. And the goal should never be, this is so hard. If our goal in parenting is to fix our kids, let me extend that. If our goal in parenting is to fix the behavior of our children tomorrow, immediately, we will lose their hearts.
Yeah.
Our goal in relationships, period, whether it's parenting, whether it's our parents, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our friends, our coworkers, our employers, the question we should be asking all the time, how can I capture their heart?
Yeah.
How can I engage with their heart? How can I move beyond their behavior? I just sat with someone yesterday afternoon, and they shared something that they're struggling with. And they said, I've set up all these boundaries, but I'm realizing it's not a behavior. There's something going on in my heart, and I want some help figuring out what's in my heart that's causing the behavior. That to me is, that's the right question. What's going on inside?
Right.
And how can we cultivate the hearts of the people that we do life with? And then on the flip side, how can we allow those around us to speak truth to our hearts and to apply grace to our hearts? How can we allow other people to cultivate our heart, trusted people? It's always a heart issue. It's always something going on internally. And if we miss that, and all we're doing is looking at behavior, this ties so well into this coming Sunday. If all we're looking at is behavior and we want to fix behavior, we'll never deal with the root of that behavior.
Yeah.
The root of the tree, the root of the fruit. You got to take care of what's going on the inside, because that's what's coming out.
Yeah. And that may have felt like it was geared only towards parents, but the heart issue is for everybody.
Yeah.
And whether you're a parent or not, I think all of us can gain some insight into how to approach being the fullness of truth, how to approach being in grace, the fullness of grace, and asking God for more capacity to be
Yeah.
able to accomplish both of those things.
I'm gonna say one more thing too,
Yeah.
because I think it's crucial for the perspective and the posture, recognizing that in my brokenness, in the dark stuff that goes on in my heart, in my head, in my mind, I need the fullness of truth and grace from those around me,
Yeah.
because my brokenness creeps up its head more often than I'd like to admit. And if I'm not surrounded by other people who are full of grace and truth, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
I need it. And so when we recognize our own brokenness and our own need for truth and grace, it makes it a lot easier for us to extend that and to increase our capacity for that for those around us.
No, that's excellent. And so it's not just about administering, but also receiving. And if you're not willing to receive the fullness of truth and grace from somebody, again, we're back to a heart issue.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about that in this coming Sunday. So definitely stay tuned for that. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me this week. You guys can tune in this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. For the next in the series of Stop Being Such a Christian. And then next Tuesday, we'll have the next Talking Branches up for you. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Love you guys.